Do you remember these Velcro cauliflowers that we sowed last July and planted out towards the end of July? They are now maturing and we have cauliflowers to eat now in mid-April. Today's video, I think it's time we went back and revisited some of the things that we've done together this year to give you an update. We have the melons to look at, have the Calabrese to look at, and I think it's about time that we saw how the compost is doing. Probably see that it's got some purple tinges around it. Now, many years ago, before we got the cauliflower that we know today, most cauliflowers were of a purple or deep red colour, and that pigment still remains today. And especially on the cauliflowers that are grown over winter, they can develop this tinge when the early morning sun hits them. This one is completely ready for harvest. Its leaves have opened. One of the ways you can prevent it is to actually just snap the leaf and fold it over. And that will stop the sun from discolouring that.
It's perfectly okay to eat though, isn't it?
It is absolutely perfectly okay to eat. In fact, if anything, it will make it a little bit sweeter than the white cauliflower that we know of. Now you can see this one hasn't got any pink tinge, and that's because the leaves are actually still protecting it from the sun. So that one's remained a lovely white cauliflower. I often say to you when I'm planting the brassicas out that we tend to space ours at around 18 inches apart and 18 inches between the rows. If you increase that, you'll get a bigger head. Something like this, absolutely fine for myself and Mrs. W, and that's why I use those spacings. It's mid-April. It's a beautiful day today here in our Norfolk no-dig garden. And the broad beans are doing particularly well, Mrs. W.
They're looking lovely, aren't they? Yeah.
The bees are dancing around it. There's a couple down here that are helping pollinate things. But they've actually... Hello, Poppy. They've actually been about Mrs. W for some time. Because if you look in here...
Oh, hang on, let me get it.
Look.
Oh, we've got baby broads. Fantastic.
The broads are on their way.
Superb.
I've just lifted the nets off of the Calabrese so that I can pick the very few weeds that we have here. It is important that you do keep on top of them, and then they won't get on top of you. And hopefully, if you sowed your Calabrese round about the same time as us, yours are looking very much like this. And when they went out, they were extremely tiny plants with just their first leaf. And since then, they're put on 1, 2, 3, 4, another 5. And are starting to take on the familiar look of a Calabrese. Some people call it broccoli because the supermarkets often call it broccoli. But it does actually only produce a big head. They can produce side stems later after you've had the main central head. These ones we won't let do that because I'll want this space once they have actually been harvested. What I do find is a good idea at this time of the year, once they get to this stage, is to just bring a bit of compost and just bring it up around the stems. Just helps to steady the plant. There's a piece of grass there, Mrs. W. Let's have him out of there. All of this just helps to steady the plant a bit. It is still April, and you know, only yesterday it was really windy,
Really
wasn't
windy
it?
yesterday, yeah. We've had quite a lot of wind and breeze, haven't we?
Yeah, we will. Now, next door to the Calabrese, we then planted out some Providence cabbage. There are 3 here. You can see 2 are romping away and doing okay. This one, I suspect, has had a little bit of slug trouble, but it is going on. So we will get something from that. It just might be slightly later than these 2 here. And I don't know if you've ever noticed the difference. For me, with myself, Mrs. W, have been growing these for so long that we can see the difference between the different plants. If you look at the Calabrese, they have a much softer leaf around the outside. You can tell it's a brassica, but they have a much softer leaf. Whereas the cabbage is much more serrated. And if you look at the back of the leaf, it already looks like a Savoy cabbage. And then the cauliflowers, we put a couple of cauliflowers on the end here. We'll just do the same here and just put a bit of compost around them. They're coming on nicely. This side of our garden is the dampest and wettest side. And so I'm not surprised that they're kicking their heels a little bit, but nevertheless they're doing really well. And you can see that the cauliflower is a slightly different green, and it has even smaller serrations around its leaf. Now with cauliflowers, it's even more imperative that they are regularly watered and that your soil is really fertile. If they even go a few days without the water they need or the nutrients they need, that's what will cause them to either bolt or they'll form their curd earlier and it'll be really small. So with cauliflowers, more than any of the other brassica family, make sure it is fertile soil and make sure if it is dry that you do actually water them, because like I say, if they go without any for just a few days, they just sit there and I'm not growing.
Sulk.
Yeah.
They sulk.
They are the sulkers of the brassica family. Now, the next thing we're going to take a look at is the compost. Oh, look at that, Mrs. W.
It's looking lovely, isn't it?
Oh, yes. That's nicely broken up, look.
Lovely bit of black gold.
Oh, yes. And as I said to you, when we put this in, what was it, mid-March, was it? Started off in March, didn't we?
Yeah, I can't remember now.
Yeah, every 30 days or so, we empty this.
Those bits of wood are what we put at the bottom just to keep the airflow a little bit, aren't they? Some of the bigger bits. But
Yeah, they will, and we'll recycle those shortly. You can see the next bit here that we've put on, that's not quite done yet. That was the next layer to go on there. And if you made yourself a DIY composter after our video, this is how you empty it. And then it's really important that you push that down, because a bit later on today I should be mowing the lawns and we should be adding the next lot to it. Now, I add to this weekly. I mow the lawns every week and make a mix up that you saw me do in our last compost video, and then it goes on top. So in a week or so's time, the stuff that we've just pushed down to the bottom, that'll be ready to harvest. Now, of course, you can leave it longer than that and get a really nice fine compost. But for us, this is absolutely fine. You can see we've just about got to the bottom of this. And that's what eventually goes. Look, you can see it's broken down even more. And that's what we spread on our new dig plots. So we are in need to top
up.
yeah, to top it up, Mrs. W. Quite right. So all I do is put it in there, and we're at April now. So I won't need any of this until October, November time this year. And every week I do the same thing. I empty what's in the bottom, put it all in here, and it just continues to compost down. As I add to it each week, what will happen is that it will start to heat up again and break down even more. I did notice that there are still people that are watching our slug video, trying to restore the balance between your plants and your slugs. And one of the recurring questions that keep coming up is, why do you throw your slugs on the compost heap? Surely you're just compounding the problem and you're just going to be spreading them back onto your garden. In all honesty, if you don't think you have any slugs in your compost heap, I'm afraid you're mistaken, sadly mistaken. We said in the video, slugs are the garden's recyclers. They will automatically find their way to your compost heap. The other thing is that they'll live most of their life actually in any fresh material that you put on there. Just like your garden soil, there are predators in there. There will be beetles and all sorts that will eat those slugs and keep the balance naturally. As for the eggs, that'll get quite hot. Certainly too hot for them to lay eggs. If you keep your compost too wet, too damp, of course, yes, they're going to love laying their eggs in there, but we don't want the compost really damp and really wet. I shan't water this. You saw as it came out of the composter, it was quite nice and damp. Not too much, it wasn't ringing with water, but it was damp, and it will only dry out here in our compost bays. So it won't be ideal conditions for them to lay their eggs. Remember we said in the video, what they look for is things like this. A leaf, and that's where they'll lay their eggs. That can go onto the compost. In fact, there's a slug there.
On there.
So that just proves what I have to say. If you don't think that you have slugs in your compost heap, think again. And of course, our other grow along was the melon. Here are melons, and you can see that they're getting their first true leaves. They're doing really quite well. Well, I know, Ken, you asked me about our melons and the fact that yours hadn't germinated yet. Hopefully they have now, over this weekend. Ours actually did take quite a while to germinate, didn't they?
They did.
And then they all came through at once, didn't they?
The first ones to germinate were the Emir,
Yeah.
closely followed by the sugar baby ones, the watermelons. Then there was nothing from the Hearts of Gold at all. What was the other one? Can't think what the other. Oh, and the Blenheim Orange. They took ages.
They did, yes.
So much so that I sowed some more of the Hearts of Gold because we had some more seed, and then they all germinated at the same time. So we have many Hearts of Gold melon.
Sure, we'll be able to sell those.
Yeah, we can pop them down at the gate.
Yeah. 50 pence each.
Yeah.
cheap as chips. So that's where we are with all the things that we've talked about, the grow with us. Hopefully yours are similar. Of course, if you live in a different gardening zone to us and you've sowed yours later, or only just sowed yours, clearly yours are not going to be like this. But at least this will give you an idea of what they are going to look like. Now, we're actually now seeing temperatures of 9.2, 10 degrees overnight in this polytunnel. It's currently 30 in here.
And we've got the sides up.
Yeah.
And the door open as well. So.
And yesterday it got to 30, and that's happening on a regular basis now. Slightly lower when the sun doesn't shine, but not by much. So we've moved our melons up to the poly now, where they can continue growing until we have space for them. And space will be coming available. You can see the potatoes are doing really well.
They are, aren't they? There's a bit of a jungle in here at the
Yes.
moment. Massive.
In fact, these first two tubs, they were put into the tubs mid-February. They're probably only a fortnight from being harvested.
Woohoo.
The celery is starting to rise to flower, so we're going to be taking that out, and whatever we can we'll chop up and freeze so that we've got a bit of celery to use until, well, these baby ones that have come through.
Yeah, that's my next job. Prick out the celeriac and the celery.
Yeah, are actually ready for us to use. Starting to eat our way through the pak choy. Stir fry this evening.
It is, absolutely, yes.
Which will be
Got to
absolutely
use it while
lovely.
we got it.
So yeah, that's where we are with all the grow-alongs, and hopefully yours are doing fine too. Do let us know in the comments below how you're getting on. And if you have any questions, then just ask them and we'll do our best to give you our best advice. We want to use today to get on with all the jobs that we need to do. And with it being April, there are plenty to do. But you'll see more about that this coming Thursday. Do have a great gardening week. We shall see you on Thursday back here in our Norfolk New Dig garden.